Julie Winters loved the quiet night shifts at White Mountain Observatory. Tonight was no different as she sat alone, watching the stars through Arizona's clear sky. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't mind. The stars kept her company. She adjusted the radio telescope settings, listening to the usual hums and crackles of deep space. Something caught her attention, a pattern that didn't fit the normal cosmic background noise. Julie leaned forward, her tired eyes suddenly alert. The pattern repeated every 12 minutes, too regular to be natural. Probably just satellite interference, she muttered to herself, making a note in her log. Still, she recorded the signal for later analysis. The next night, Julie heard it again. Same pattern, same 12-minute interval. By the third night, she knew this was something important. She called her colleague Alan Rodriguez. "You need to hear this," she said when he arrived, his face showing concern at being called in at 3 a.m. "It's been repeating for 3 nights now." Alan listened to the recording, his forehead creasing. "That's not one of ours," he said finally. "Not any Earth satellite I know." They spent the next week analyzing the signal. Alan wrote software to decode the pattern, trying different algorithms. On day 8, something clicked. "It's a language," he whispered, staring at his computer screen. "These segments here, they're repeating in patterns consistent with communication." Julie looked over his shoulder. "Can we translate it?" "Not exactly, but I can identify certain segments that appear to be coordinates." Alan pointed to a series of numbers. "And this sequence here keeps showing up alongside what might be a reference to our solar system." As days passed, they decoded more fragments. One night, Alan burst into the observatory control room, his face pale. "I found something," he said, handing Julie a printout. "This word here, it appears in every transmission. I think it translates roughly to integration or assimilation." "Integration of what?" Julie asked. "Of us. Earth. Look at this." He showed her another decoded segment. "These are communications between multiple vessels. They're discussing Earth specifically, and the time frame they're working with puts them arriving here in about 6 months." Julie felt cold fear spread through her chest. "We need to tell someone." Their findings were initially met with skepticism. The NASA officials they contacted listened politely but seemed unconvinced. It wasn't until Julie and Alan demonstrated their decryption method that things changed. Within days, they were flown to Washington for a closed-door meeting. The Pentagon meeting room was crowded with military officials, scientists, and government leaders. Julie felt out of place in her simple blouse and slacks among the uniforms and suits. General Paul Carter, a stern-faced man with gray hair, led the meeting. "Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Winters, please explain what you found." Alan connected his laptop to the room's display system. "We've intercepted communications between what appear to be vessels of an advanced civilization," he began. "They're discussing Earth as a target for something they call integration into the hegemony." He showed them the decoded transmissions. "Based on similar phrases we've managed to translate, this integration process is not peaceful. Previous integrations mentioned in their communications resulted in the complete subjugation of planetary populations." The room fell silent. "How certain are you of this translation?" asked a woman Julie recognized as the Secretary of Defense. "The basic meaning is clear," Alan replied. "Though we don't understand all the nuances, the intent is unmistakable. They're coming here to take over." "And they'll be here when?" General Carter asked. 6 months, Julie said, based on their discussed travel times and coordinates. The meeting lasted hours. Experts were called in to verify their findings. By evening, a global security council had been assembled via video conference. Leaders from major nations listened in growing alarm as Julie and Alan presented their evidence. "We need to prepare defenses," said the Russian president. "Against a civilization capable of interstellar travel," countered the British Prime Minister. "What defense could possibly be adequate?" Arguments broke out about whether to inform the public. Some leaders insisted people had a right to know. Others warned of global panic. Julie watched the debate with growing frustration. "May I speak?" she finally asked. All eyes turned to her. "While you argue, they get closer," she said simply. "We need to decide on a course of action now." "She's right," said President Harris. "We need a plan, and we need it today." In the days that followed, military forces worldwide were quietly put on high alert. Scientists and engineers were gathered in secret facilities to analyze what little they knew of the alien technology based on the signals. Julie and Alan worked with a team of linguists and cryptographers to decode more of the transmissions. Each new translation brought more disturbing news. They refer to Earth as a Category 3 acquisition, Julie told the emergency committee 2 weeks later. "From context, we believe this means they see us as technologically advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to pose a serious threat." "They're wrong," said General Carter. "We may not have interstellar ships, but we know how to fight." The weight of knowledge pressed down on Julie. At night, she looked up at the stars that had once seemed so beautiful and welcoming. Now they harbored a threat racing toward Earth, and only a handful of people knew it was coming. One morning, a Navy communications specialist named Frank Holloway approached Julie as she left the secure facility. "Dr. Winters," he said, falling into step beside her. "I've been studying these transmissions and I have an idea." "What kind of idea?" Julie asked, too tired for small talk. "What if we send them a message back?" Julie stopped walking. "You mean, contact them? Reveal that we know they're coming?" Frank nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. "Not just that. We know they're coming, but that we've been listening to their secure communications, that we've broken their codes." "Why would we do that?" "To make them think twice," Frank said. "To show them we might be more advanced than they realize." Julie considered this. "It's a huge risk." "Bigger than doing nothing?" Frank asked. That afternoon, they presented the idea to the committee. Debate raged for hours. Some thought it would only provoke the aliens to attack sooner. Others saw it as their only chance. "It's a bluff," Julie admitted. "But sometimes a bluff is all you need." Eventually, a decision was made. Earth would send one message to the approaching fleet. It needed to be perfect, threatening enough to give them pause, but not so aggressive as to provoke immediate attack. As Julie helped craft the message that might determine humanity's fate, she wondered if the quiet nights at her observatory were gone forever. Whatever happened next, the stars would never look the same to her again. Frank Holloway stood before the emergency council, his hands steady despite his racing heart. The room was filled with world leaders, military chiefs, and scientists, all looking to him for a plan that might save humanity. "We can't match their weapons," Frank said, pointing to the projections of the alien fleet based on decoded transmissions. "But we might be able to plant a seed of doubt." General Carter frowned. "Explain." "They believe we're just a Category 3 civilization, advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to fight back effectively. What if we make them think they've underestimated us?" Frank moved to the interactive display and pulled up the decoded alien communications. "We know their language patterns now. We know how they encrypt their messages. What if we send them a message in their own encryption format, showing that we've not only intercepted but deciphered their secure communications?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "A bluff," said the Chinese premier through her translator. "Yes," Frank admitted, "but one that might make them reconsider. If they think we're more technologically advanced than they realize, they might pause. That pause gives us more time." President Harris nodded slowly. "What exactly would this message say?" Frank had thought about this for days. "Something simple, but powerful. We know you're coming. We've studied your vulnerabilities. Reconsider." Debate erupted immediately. Some argued the message was too threatening and might provoke immediate attack. Others thought it wasn't threatening enough. Hours passed as they argued about wording, tone, and potential consequences. Julie Winters, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "Every hour we spend arguing is an hour closer they get to Earth. We need to decide." In the end, they approved Frank's message with one small change. The final version read, "We know you're coming. We've studied your tactics and technology. Reconsider." The message would be transmitted using Earth's most powerful radio telescope array, modified to match the frequency and encryption patterns of the alien fleet's communications. The day of transmission arrived. Julie stood beside Frank in the control room of the Atacama Large Array in Chile. Scientists and military personnel crowded around them, watching as the final preparations were made. "Are we certain about this?" Julie asked quietly. Frank looked at her. "No, but I'm certain about what happens if we do nothing." Julie nodded. She'd seen enough in the alien communications to know what integration meant. Enslavement at best, extinction at worst. "Transmission ready," announced the lead technician. President Harris, watching via secure video link, gave the final authorization. "Send it." Frank pressed the button. The message left Earth, traveling at the speed of light toward the approaching fleet. "Now we wait," he said. The next days were tense. Military forces worldwide remained on high alert. Civilian leaders debated whether to inform the public. So far, the existence of the alien fleet had been kept secret to prevent panic, but rumors were spreading. 5 days after transmission, Julie was awakened by a phone call at 3 a.m. "They've changed course," said Alan Rodriguez, his voice tight, with excitement. "The fleet has slowed down. They've stopped accelerating toward us." Julie sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "Are you sure?" "Positive. And there's more. They're transmitting new messages between their ships, lots of them. Something's happening." Julie dressed quickly and rushed to the secure facility. The place was buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Frank was already there looking at the latest data. "What do we know?" she asked. "They've reduced speed by 30%, he said, "and their communication patterns have changed completely. More complex, more frequent. We think they're debating what to do." Our bluff worked? Julie could hardly believe it. Maybe. Or maybe they're just taking time to plan a more thorough attack. As days turned into weeks, the alien fleet continued its approach, but at the reduced speed. The emergency council used the extra time to prepare. Underground shelters were expanded. Military defenses were strengthened. Scientists worked around the clock trying to develop new weapons based on what little they understood of alien technology. Then, a month after Earth's message, something unexpected happened. The fleet stopped completely at the edge of the solar system. A single smaller vessel detached from the main group and continued toward Earth. "They're sending an advance ship," General Carter announced during the daily briefing. "ETA to Earth orbit 3 days. "Attack?" asked the Secretary of Defense. "Unknown. It's a smaller vessel. Could be a scout. Could be a diplomatic ship, too." Days later, Earth received its first direct communication from the aliens. The message came through on the same frequencies Earth had used for its warning. "We are Krith, representatives of the hegemony. We request dialogue with Earth leaders." The Emergency Council debated how to respond. Was it genuine or a trick to locate Earth's leadership for targeted strikes? "We have to take the chance," said Frank. "If they wanted to destroy us, they could have done it from the edge of the solar system." A secure meeting site was prepared in Geneva, Switzerland. A small team was selected to represent Earth. President Harris, General Carter, Julie Winters, Frank Holloway, and a team of linguists and scientists. As they waited in the heavily guarded conference room, Julie felt her heart pounding. She looked at Frank, who seemed surprisingly calm. "Aren't you scared?" she asked. He nodded, terrified, but also curious. "We're about to meet beings from another world. No matter what happens next, this is historic." The room's large doors opened. 3 beings entered, escorted by UN security personnel who looked nervous, but professional. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with gray-blue skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and black, set in triangular faces with no visible nose or ears. They wore simple dark uniforms with symbols Julie recognized from their transmissions. Rank insignia, she assumed. The lead alien stepped forward and spoke in a deep, resonant voice. To everyone's surprise, It spoke in perfect English. "I am Fleet Commander Zareth of the hegemony vessel Dawnbringer. We come seeking understanding of how your world intercepted and decoded our secure communications. This has never happened before." President Harris stepped forward. "I am President Harris of the United States, one of Earth's nations. We welcome you and hope for peaceful dialogue." The alien's large eyes blinked slowly. "Your warning message has caused great debate within the Hegemony Council. Some believe you are more advanced than our initial scans indicated. Others believe you simply got lucky." Frank spoke up. "Not luck, skill, and determination, Commander." Zareth turned all four of its arms outward in what might have been a gesture of acknowledgement. "Perhaps this is what we have come to determine." As the first official meeting between humanity and the hegemony began, Julie caught Frank's eye across the table. His bluff had worked better than anyone could have hoped. Their single warning had changed the course of history. Now they just had to convince these aliens that humanity deserved to remain free. Commander Susan Walsh watched the alien delegates carefully. As the head of Earth's newly formed First Contact Division, she had been chosen to lead the ongoing negotiations with the Krith. 2 weeks had passed since their arrival, and every day brought new revelations. "Your species continues to surprise us," said Zareth, the lead Krith representative. His forearms moved in flowing patterns as he spoke, adding emphasis to his words. "No civilization at your development stage has ever detected our communications before arrival." Susan nodded. "Perhaps you underestimated us." "Perhaps," Zareth agreed. His large black eyes blinked slowly. "This unprecedented situation has caused significant debate within the Hegemony Council." They sat in a conference room in Geneva, surrounded by translators, scientists, and military observers from both sides. The walls were lined with security. Personnel, both human and Krith. "Tell me more about this debate," Susan said. She had learned that the Krith respected directness. Zareth's skin shifted to a slightly darker blue, which Susan had come to recognize as a sign of tension. "The hegemony has existed for over 50,000 Earth years," he explained. "In that time, we have integrated 327 civilizations. Never has a Category 3 civilization detected us before first contact." "What exactly does integration mean to your people?" Susan asked, though she already had a good idea from the intercepted communications. "Absorption into the hegemony. The planetary population becomes workers, soldiers, and resources for the greater empire." Zareth spoke without emotion, as if describing something ordinary. "Higher category civilizations receive more autonomy. Lower categories receive less." "And Earth?" "Category 3 civilizations typically become resource worlds. Your people would serve the hegemony in mines, factories, and agricultural centers." Susan felt cold anger rise within her but kept her voice level. "That sounds like slavery." "That is a concept from your history," Zareth replied. "The hegemony calls it purposeful existence." Frank Holloway, sitting beside Susan, spoke up. "And the debate within your council? Some believe Earth should be studied rather than integrated. Your ability to detect and decode our communications suggests unusual capabilities. Others see this same ability as proof that humans are potentially dangerous and should be eliminated immediately." The room fell silent. Eliminated. The word hung in the air. Susan leaned forward. "If you're divided about us, then perhaps we have something to offer the hegemony that integration would destroy." Zareth tilted his head. "Explain." "Human history is filled with adaptation and innovation. When faced with challenges, we find creative solutions. Your own presence here proves this. We took a communication we weren't supposed to detect, decoded it when we weren't supposed to understand it, and responded in a way that made your entire fleet pause." She gestured to the window, where the Swiss Alps were visible in the distance. "Throughout our history, humans have climbed mountains everyone said were impossible to climb. We've cured diseases everyone said were incurable. We've built cities in deserts and on ice. We adapt. We overcome. This is common to many species," Zareth said dismissively. "Is it?" Susan challenged. "If that were true, Would you be sitting here now, negotiating with a Category 3 civilization? For the first time, Zareth seemed uncertain. What are you proposing? A cultural and technological exchange instead of integration. Earth remains independent, but we establish trade relations, knowledge sharing, and diplomatic ties with the hegemony. You gain our unique perspective and problem-solving abilities. We gain knowledge of the wider galaxy. The second Krith delegate, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Unprecedented. The hegemony does not make such arrangements. Then maybe it's time they started, Frank said. If your goal is to make the hegemony stronger, consider what you'd lose by forcing us into mines and factories. You'd lose our creativity, our drive, our spirit. Susan nodded. Integration would destroy the very qualities that made us detect your fleet in the first place. Zareth and the other delegates conferred in their own language for several minutes. Susan exchanged glances with Frank and the other human representatives. This was their gamble, appeal to the hegemony's self-interest rather than their compassion. Finally, Zareth turned back to them. Your proposal is intriguing. I will present it to the Hegemony Council. However, I must warn you that many will oppose it. Our ways are ancient and not easily changed. All we ask is that you give us a chance to prove our worth as potential allies rather than subjects, Susan said. The meeting concluded with the Krith agreeing to return to their fleet to consult with their superiors. As they left, Susan felt a mix of hope and dread. They had planted the seed, but would it grow? In the days that followed, Earth's governments worked together as never before. The public had finally been informed about the alien fleet, and while there had been initial panic, it had been followed by a wave of unity. Old enemies put aside their differences in the face of a common threat. Susan was called to daily briefings with world leaders. The question on everyone's mind was simple. What if the hegemony rejected their proposal? We need to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best, she told the emergency council. If they decide to attack, we need defenses. If they want to continue talking, we need to be ready with more compelling arguments. 3 weeks after the Krith delegates left Earth, their ship returned. Zareth requested another meeting, this time with a larger Earth delegation. In a grand hall at the United Nations, representatives from every nation gathered to hear the hegemony's response. Susan sat at the center of the Earth delegation, with Frank beside her. Zareth entered with 5 other Krith, more than had come before. Susan wasn't sure if this was a good sign or a bad one. People of Earth, Zareth began, his voice echoing through the hall. The Hegemony Council has considered your proposal. There has been much debate. Susan held her breath. The Council remains deadlocked on Earth's fate, Zareth continued. This has never happened in hegemony history. Some support your proposal, for a new type of relationship. Others insist on traditional integration. Still others advocate for your immediate elimination as a potential threat. Murmurs spread through the hall. Because no consensus could be reached, the Council has authorized an extended observation period. The fleet will remain at the edge of your solar system. We will continue diplomatic exchanges and cultural study. After 1 Earth year, the Council will decide. Susan exhaled slowly. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't defeat either. They had bought time. There is one more thing, Zareth added. The Council is concerned about certain factions within the hegemony who might act against Earth. Without authorization, I have been instructed to warn you to be vigilant. As the meeting adjourned, Frank turned to Susan. Did he just warn us that some of them might attack anyway? Susan nodded grimly. Yes. They're divided about us, just as we hoped. But that brings its own dangers. They had changed the hegemony's plans with a single warning. Now they needed to prepare for whatever came next, be it peace or war. Eric Miller had never expected to find himself working in a secret base beneath the Rocky Mountains. 6 months ago, he had been an engineer at a small tech company in Ohio. Now he led the most important project in human history. The power couplings need to be reinforced, he told his team as they gathered around the prototype. If we're reading the Krith schematics correctly, the energy flow will be 5 times what our best systems can handle. The prototype was Earth's attempt to adapt alien technology they had glimpsed during their meetings with the Krith. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly. Eric preferred to think of it as a shield. "Dr. Miller," called a voice from the doorway. Eric looked up to see Commander Susan Walsh entering the lab. "How's our progress?" Eric wiped his hands on his pants and straightened his glasses. "We're making headway. The power systems are still our biggest challenge, but we've solved the radiation leakage issue." Susan nodded, her expression serious. "I need it operational in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Eric felt his stomach drop. "We're months away from a working prototype." "We don't have months," Susan said quietly. She motioned for Eric to follow her into a private office off the main lab. Once the door closed, Susan's professional demeanor slipped just slightly. "We've intercepted new communications between hegemony vessels. A faction called the Purists is unhappy with the Council's deadlock on Earth. They're planning something." "An attack?" "We think so. Smaller vessels have been observed moving away from the main fleet. They're trying to be discreet, but our monitoring systems caught them." Eric ran a hand through his already messy hair. "Even if we get the shield working, it won't cover the whole planet." "We know. We're focusing on protecting key locations, major cities, power grids, military bases. The lunar base is our biggest concern." The lunar base had been Earth's greatest achievement since the Krith arrival. Using information gleaned from diplomatic exchanges, Earth's scientists had made breakthroughs in propulsion and habitat construction. A permanent base now housed 300 scientists, engineers, and military personnel on the Moon, working to develop technology that might help Earth in case of conflict. "The lunar base has its own prototype shield," Eric said. "Will it work?" He hesitated. "In theory." Susan checked her watch. "I have another meeting. 2 weeks, Dr. Miller, do whatever it takes." After she left, Eric gathered his team leaders. "New deadline," he announced. 2 weeks. The protests were immediate and loud. "Impossible. We need at least 2 months. The power systems alone will take 3 weeks to calibrate." Eric held up his hands. "I understand, but this isn't a normal project with a normal timeline. Earth's safety depends on us." He took a deep breath. "Let's break this down into components. What can we get working in 2 weeks? Even if it's not perfect." Across the globe, similar conversations were happening in other secret facilities. Nations that had once pointed nuclear weapons at each other now shared resources and technology. Chinese scientists worked alongside Americans. Russian engineers collaborated with Japanese experts. The common threat had united humanity in ways no one had thought possible. In a facility beneath Geneva, psychologist Olivia Grant led a different kind of project. Her team analyzed every communication with the Krith, developing deeper insights into their social structures and motivations. "They're not as unified as they want us to believe," she explained to Susan during their weekly briefing. "The hegemony isn't one empire but a coalition of species with competing interests." "How does that help us?" Susan asked. Olivia pointed to the display showing a chart of known hegemony species. "The Krith are just one member race, though they appear to be the military leaders. There are at least 12 other major species, each with their own agendas. And the Purists, a faction that cuts across species lines. They believe in racial purity and the superiority of the original hegemony founders. They see integration of new species as dilution." Olivia highlighted several sections of intercepted communications. "Our warning message scared them. If a category 3 civilization could detect them, what else might we be capable of? They see us as a threat to their power structure." Susan considered this information. "So they might attack regardless of what the Council decides." "I believe so. And there's something else." Olivia pulled up a new file. "We've detected communications suggesting that not everyone in the hegemony approves of the integration policy. Some advocate for a more cooperative approach to galactic relations. Potential allies? Possibly, but they seem to be a minority voice." The next day, Susan briefed world leaders on both reports. The news was received with grim determination. "We continue diplomatic efforts," President Harris said. But we also prepare for the worst. Preparation took many forms. Underground shelters were expanded in major cities. Food and medical supplies were stockpiled. A fleet of experimental spacecraft, incorporating theoretical applications of observed Krith technology, was built in secret lunar facilities. Eric's team worked around the clock on the shield technology. They made unexpected progress when a young engineer named Lisa Chen discovered a way to adapt Earth's existing power grid to handle the energy requirements. It won't be pretty, she explained to Eric, but it will work for about 48 hours before burning out. 48 hours might be enough, Eric replied. Good work. 2 days before their deadline, disaster struck. The lunar base detected 3 hegemony vessels on an intercept course. They weren't responding to communications. Purists, Susan told the emergency council. They're making their move. Is the lunar base ready? Asked General Carter. As ready as they can be. The shield is operational but untested. And our experimental fleet? 6 vessels, barely more than prototypes. President Harris looked around the table at the leaders of Earth's nations. This is what we've prepared for. We knew this might happen. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Earth's experimental fleet was deployed to support the lunar base. Eric's team activated shield generators around key locations on Earth. Military forces worldwide went to maximum alert. Susan watched from the command center as the first shots were fired in space. The Purist vessels opened fire on the lunar base. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed like the shield would fail. Then it stabilized, absorbing the energy weapon's impact. Earth's small fleet engaged the attackers, using tactics no one had seen before. Instead of meeting the Purists head-on, the Earth vessels used the moon's low gravity to execute maneuvers the alien ships couldn't match. They're actually doing it, Frank Holloway whispered beside Susan. They're holding their own. The battle lasted 6 hours. 1 Earth vessel was destroyed, and the lunar base suffered damage to its outer facilities. But 2 Purist ships were disabled, and the 3rd retreated. As reports came in, Susan felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in humanity's achievement, sorrow for the lives lost, and worry about what would come next. Their first real encounter with hegemony weapons had shown that humans could fight back, but it had also shown the enormous power gap they still faced, and no one knew how the Hegemony Council would react to this unauthorized attack, or to Earth's defense. The single warning that had changed everything had now led to the first battle between Earth and the stars. What it would lead to next, no one could say. The news of the battle at the lunar base spread quickly through the Hegemony fleet. Within hours of the Purist attack, the main Hegemony Council ship moved closer to Earth, not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to show their interest in what had happened. Julie Winters watched the massive vessel on the observatory's screens. 6 months had passed since she first detected the alien signals, and now she stood as part of Earth's official welcome committee, waiting for the arrival of the Hegemony Lord. Never thought I'd be meeting the leader of a galactic empire, she said to Frank Holloway, who stood beside her. Never thought Earth would win its first space battle either, Frank replied. But here we are. The victory, if it could be called that, had been small but significant. Earth's experimental fleet had held off the Purist attack, using tactics the aliens hadn't expected. More importantly, the battle had been observed by the main Hegemony fleet. Do you think it will make a difference? Julie asked. Before Frank could answer, Commander Susan Walsh approached them. They're ready for us, she said. The shuttle will be here in 10 minutes. The landing site had been prepared on a flat plain outside Geneva. World leaders and representatives had gathered to meet the Hegemony Lord, the first time this being had ever visited Earth personally. As they waited, Eric Miller joined them, looking tired but proud. The shields worked, he said. Not perfectly, but they worked. Your team did the impossible, Susan told him. We had good teachers, Eric replied with a small smile. Even if they didn't know they were teaching us. All the diplomatic meetings with the Krith had been carefully recorded and analyzed. Every piece of technology they used, every comment they made about hegemony systems, all of it had been studied by Earth's best minds. The result had been a leap forward in human technology unlike anything in history. A bright light appeared in the sky, growing larger as it approached. The Hegemony shuttle was unlike the Krith vessels they had seen before, larger, more elegant, with glowing symbols along its hull. "Remember the protocol," Susan reminded them all. "Show respect but not fear." The shuttle landed softly on the prepared pad. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened, and beings began to emerge. First came Krith guards, their forearms, holding ceremonial weapons. Then several aliens of species humans had never seen before, advisors to the Hegemony Lord, they had been told. Finally, the Lord himself appeared. He, if he was the right term, stood nearly 9 feet tall, with golden skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Unlike the Krith, he had only 2 arms, but his head was crowned with what looked like living tendrils that moved slowly in the air. President Harris stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you." The Hegemony Lord studied the assembled humans. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than any human voice, but clear. "I have come to witness for myself the world that has caused such disruption in my empire." The meeting moved to a specially constructed building nearby. Inside, Earth's representatives sat across from the Hegemony delegation at a large round table, a shape chosen to show equality rather than hierarchy. "Let us speak plainly," the Hegemony Lord began. "In 50,000 years, no world marked for integration has ever detected our approach, decoded our communications, or successfully defended against even a small attack force. You have done all 3. We are full of surprises," President Harris said simply. "Indeed, my council remains divided on how to proceed with Earth. The battle at your moon has only widened that division." Olivia Grant, who had been invited as an expert on hegemony psychology, spoke up. "If I may ask, what did you observe that caused such disagreement?" The Hegemony Lord's tendrils moved in what might have been surprise at being addressed directly. "Your tactics. Your vessels were technically inferior, yet they prevailed through methods our simulators had not predicted. This suggests a way of thinking that is unusual." "Humans are adaptable," Olivia said. "We see problems differently. We find solutions where others might not look. So it seems." The Lord's gaze moved around the table. "Tell me why Earth should not be integrated, like hundreds of worlds before it." Julie felt Susan tense beside her. This was the moment everything had been leading to. Susan stood. "With respect, perhaps that is the wrong question. The right question might be, what can Earth offer the Hegemony as an ally that it cannot offer, as a subjected world?" And your answer? Innovation, creativity, new perspectives. Susan gestured to Eric. "In 6 months, using only glimpses of your technology, we built defense systems that could withstand hegemony weapons. Imagine what we could develop as partners rather than slaves." The Hegemony Lord was silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made a sound that might have been laughter. 50,000 years, he said. "That is how long the hegemony has existed. In that time, we have grown comfortable with our patterns, perhaps too comfortable." He rose to his full height. "I have made my decision. Earth will not be integrated or destroyed. Instead, you will be offered conditional membership as a sovereign system." Murmurs spread through the human delegation. This was more than they had hoped for. "There are conditions," the Lord continued. "You will share your methods of innovation. You will accept hegemony observers. You will not develop offensive weapons beyond certain limits, and in return," President Harris asked, "access to knowledge, limited travel rights within hegemony space, protection from external threats." The Lord's tendrils moved in complex patterns, and recognition as the first civilization to ever alter the hegemony's expansion methods. 3 months later, Julie stood on the observation deck of the hegemony flagship, looking down at Earth. As part of the formal delegation to sign the treaty, she had been invited aboard along with representatives from all major Earth nations. "It's beautiful from up here," said a voice beside her. She turned to find Frank Holloway. Everything looks peaceful from a distance, she replied. Not just the view, Frank said. What we accomplished. 6 months ago we were facing enslavement, or extinction. Now we're signing a treaty as equals. The hegemony lord entered the observation deck, accompanied by his advisors and the Earth delegation leaders. Everyone grew quiet as he approached Julie. Dr. Winters, he said, using her title. Your discovery started everything, not just for Earth, but for the hegemony itself. Julie felt her face grow warm at the attention. I was just doing my job. Perhaps, but that job changed the course of history. The Lord's voice carried to everyone in the room. Your warning changed everything, not just for Earth, but for the hegemony itself. We had forgotten that true strength comes not from conquest, but from adaptation and cooperation. As the formal treaty signing began, Julie thought about the night she had first noticed that strange pattern in the stars. One small observation had led to Earth's greatest challenge and its greatest opportunity. The Galactic Empire had targeted Earth. But humans had done what they always did when faced with impossible odds. They adapted. They innovated. They surprised, and with a single warning they had changed their destiny among the stars.